name is David Wilkerson. I was the first principal of South High School. It occurs to me that people who come to this school as students would profit from some historical background that are very important to telling the story of South and to becoming a part of it. The 1950s were a very significant time in Pueblo. The city had grown tremendously during World War II, and strangely enough, during the pre-war times, for as far back as anyone could remember, Pueblo was two school systems. The Arkansas River divided School District 1, which was on the north side, and District 20, which was on the south side. And so Central and Centennial were not only rivals, they were actually from separate school districts. It was in the early or late 40s, early 50s that the district was unified, and it became District 60, and the entire operation came under the supervision of a new Board of Education, which represented the new unified district. Early in the 1950s then, the new school board realized that the enrollments that they were facing, among other things, were something that needed attention because the community was still growing. And so they brought a couple of professors from the University of Colorado in Boulder to examine patterns of growth and enrollment projections and make a report to them as to what they perceived to be the necessary program of increased facilities that would be necessary for a district of that size. At that point, the district then commissioned architects to work on what they decided was necessary for a growing school district. And there were a number of things, but chief among those was the idea that 2 new high schools were appropriate for the plan. While we went about our business, or whatever that was, whether we were teachers or students, we just did our thing as if nothing was going on, but the architects were busy, and what they made some key decisions. One of those was that the buildings that they were going to plan would be twins. In other words, they were going to use one set of plans and drawings that would be used in the construction of both new high schools. And not much was said about that. As I pointed out, we all went about our business wherever we were assigned in the district. And it turned out that the plans they were working on really were to continue the kind of secondary education which had been going on in the district or in the 2 districts for many, many years. They planned for a facility that would continue that operation. The thing that really turned, however, and caught us in a situation that was most interesting was when the Russians had the audacity to put an unmanned satellite in orbit, which we affectionately called Sputnik, or they did, and it shocked the entire nation. It shocked the Congress of the United States to the point that they passed the National Defense Education Act, and in a strange situation where they did not blame public education in the country for the fact that the Russians had apparently, for at least momentarily, outdone us in the technique and technology that put the satellite in orbit. They felt that it was time for the federal government to become involved, and so millions of dollars came without any bickering by the partisans or any of that sort to finance careful attention. Particularly, they were concerned about the sciences and mathematics. But in any event, millions of dollars were invested in places like the National Science Foundation, summertime programs to retrain teachers were abundant all over the country. And so we had the appearance suddenly of an alphabetical soup of programs to improve education. There was the school mathematics study group that examined how and when we introduced certain aspects of mathematics in our program, and the placement of algebra and all sorts of things that involved mathematics. And so we talked about SMSG math. The biological sciences were suddenly elevated from a very kind of a secondary position in the curriculum programs of most high schools. And we had BSCS biology, the Biological Science Study Committee. And then there was the physical science committee. So we had PSSC physics and chemistry, which had been carried on at a certain level for a long, long time, was now suddenly upgraded, and we had what we call chem study chemistry. And all of this was a factor, very much a factor, in all secondary education plans. The fact that this change was occurring not only was going to be affecting the new high schools, but it was affecting the old high schools as well. And so what it boiled down to was that rather than South High School as was going to be just an extension of the sorts of things that had been going on at Pueblo Central High School for many, many years, it was really, both of those schools were affected by these changes in these basic curriculum areas. And not only that, but some of the congressmen and senators who were involved in all this said, well, now wait a minute, not only do we have to be concerned about math and science, we also have to realize that we're going to be, if we're going to be leaders in the age of satellites and study of the universe, we need to have more proficiency in foreign languages. And so they made funds available to be sure that schools upgraded their foreign language programs and had language laboratories, and in order to produce the kind of knowledge that we would use in international affairs. And they said that in all of this new curriculum activity with specialized units and so forth, we needed better guidance. And so they pumped money into guidance and counseling. Most schools prior to that time had someone called an advisor, an academic advisor. The whole area of guidance and counseling was given a boost. And so all of that made me think, and I said many times, South High School was conceived in one educational age and was born in another. And so when we gathered the Colts together for the first time in September of 1959 to start, we were starting really on par with the other older high schools because they too had been, their curriculum and their procedures had been affected by the same kinds of government activity and so on that was ours. And our faculty, we were very fortunate that members of our faculty, many of them, particularly in the math and science areas, had gone to National Science Foundation workshops and were right up to snuff on the new programs. And so our start gave us, as if we were on the starting line with our mother school, Central, or with our cousin Centennial on the other side of the river. We were all starting with new approaches in these curricular areas. And it wasn't as if we were struggling to produce the kind of excellence that had been recognized years before. We were all on the same boat of trying to move out into educational programs for the 21st century, really, at least for the atomic age and for the age of interplanetary study and activity. So that was the circumstances. And suddenly then in September of 1959, it was my great privilege as the newly appointed principal of the school to greet a few less than 1,000. I think, if my memory serves me correctly, there were 996 students who showed up on the first day of school at the new South High School. And they came through the door. As they came through the doors, they were directed to the auditorium. And so we started out with 996 people in the South High School auditorium, and school started. The assistant principal went about the business of explaining how we were going to distribute the programs. We had student programs all prepared. We had teachers assigned to the sophomore, it was a 3-year high school at that time, to the sophomore group, the junior group, the senior group, passing out their programs for the year. They all had to have a map of the building because all 996 of them were strangers. They didn't even know their way around. They had to have it to carry their map to find out where room 13 was, if that's where they had to go pick up their, or turn in their first program. And so that was the sort of stage. And after all of those technicalities had been worked out and we were hopefully ready to go, it became my responsibility then to stand up and say something that was inaugural, I guess you'd say, for the student body. And I did. I told them how much the people of Pueblo had sacrificed in terms of taxation and the money that was invested in our school, brand new school. You could still smell the varnish on the woodwork. It was really something I felt they should be grateful for. And they had a tradition of excellence that they had inherited from the other schools that had to be not only protected but advanced. And I wound up my pep talk, I guess you'd say, like I was the coach, getting the troops ready for the game to start. And I said, I and all of you and all of the faculty and all of us have a responsibility not only to do everything we can to be the best we can be, and when all that is done, we need to all reach down deep inside ourselves and come up with something extra for South. And so with that kind of climax, I guess you'd say, to the pep talk, I sent them out, and they took their maps and they found their way to the classes that they're going to be taking, and we started school at South High School. That's the story of how it all came to be, and somehow or other the speech made some impact because everyone responded. The faculty, the student body, and the effort to do something extra for South seemed to put us off to a great first-year start. I guess I would say that if there's any legacy that I would wish for South now and for all time to come, it would be that every person who comes and joins the student body, the faculty, anything to do with it, would undertake whatever their experience would be to make it the richest possible experience that would affect their lives in a positive way, not only while they're there, but in years to come. And that the traditions of something extra for South, that means when you do it, it's something extra for yourself. You've learned something about yourself that you maybe didn't even know. And that as the years go by, you will treasure the time you spent there in whatever capacity it was, that it made you a better person, and that you would wish the same for all that followed you. What does something extra for South really mean? Well, what it means is we're all in this together, and we arrive with very different roles, with very different abilities. We can't all be miracle workers, but what we can all do is our very best. And what we will find as we are South Colts and as we go on in life, we find that even when we think we've done the very best we can, down deep inside ourselves, we know we can reach for something extra. And whatever it is, and bring it up, that's what this something extra for South means. It means do the right thing, the best you can do it, in terms of your own abilities, and then ask yourself, is there something more I can do, something extra I can do? And we're all in this together, and we're all obligated to do that. If we all do that, all that effort, and each with some little whatever that we pull out of down deep inside ourselves, that's the something extra for South. Something that no one asks you to do it. You do it because you're a South Colt and you're obligated to do it if you possibly can. So. Now, that story goes back then to the summer before South opened. The director of secondary education had a workshop which was held actually at Central, which included herself and the two high school principals, Sally Rosso from Central and the Centennial principal, sat as a threesome, and they went through all this stuff involving school colors and nicknames and that sort of thing. And they made several decisions. The one decision was that they were going to retain white as one of the school colors, because the Centennial were red and white, Central was blue and white, and the other two schools were going to be something else in white. And so that decision was made. And then they decided that they couldn't use purple because South Denver High School is purple and white. And if it happened to turn out that the Pueblo South would come up with purple and white, that would confuse everybody for years to come between Pueblo South and South Denver. So they ruled out purple, which would have been a logical one. Green had already been taken by the Catholic school in Pueblo. They were green and white. And so they decided that the two colors they would use would be gold and black. And Solly argued that black and white wouldn't be a bad combination. He thought it could be properly used to be a good color. So anyway, they made the decision. And then they looked at the time of all this going on. The Baltimore Colts with Johnny Unitas and that bunch were a really big deal in pro football. And so were the Philadelphia Eagles. And so they decided that they were going to take those two nicknames, Colts and Eagles, and that whoever ended up as the Eagles would have the golden Eagles, that made sense, and whoever ended up with the black would be the Colts. And some people argued that that's the Colts, or no, the black and white would be terrible. Solly didn't think so. So anyway, they decided that they'd flip a coin, and whoever won the coin toss could make the decision. And Solly Rosso won the toss, and he said they'll be the South Colts. And Lyle Kingery said the East Eagles will be fine with us, and that's the way it went. So those two, Solly won the toss, and Solly Rosso, the principal of Central High School, was actually the guy who made the decision that the South would be black and white Colts. The attitude that you have as a team and as a student at the school, it's catching. If everybody has a positive thrust about the things they do there, and then think they can find something extra. Yeah. That's where greatness comes from. Greatness comes from those extras. Going back to days at Central High School, which was our mother school, of course, we have to give some credit to Solly Rosso, who was the principal. And Solly, knew he was going to lose a considerable number of a faculty that he was very proud of at Central, gave me, his assistant, permission to interview anybody I wanted to on the faculty about the prospect of leaving Central and coming with me to help open the new high school. So I appreciated that fact, and at the same time, he made it known among the faculty that if they were interested in transferring to South, they needed to talk to me, and so some did. One I remember so very well, I asked Marge Keeler. I asked Marge Keeler, who was a prominent member of our Central faculty, had grown up there and spent all her life in teaching at Central, and I invited her to come out and be one of our new counselors. And she said, "No, I really appreciate the invitation, but I've spent a good part of my life at Central, and I guess I'll stay." I said, "Well, I understand, and we'll let it go at that." And so that happened, and about a week later, 2 weeks maybe at most, she came in and said, "You know, I got thinking about the idea, and I thought to myself, why shouldn't I be part of the starting of that new school? So if you still have the position open and you still want me, I'll come." And I said, "Oh, yes, we do have the position and we do want you to come." And so Marjorie Keeler was one of those who became a longtime member of South High School. And I recall one time when one of the coaches was having a reunion of players, and they had some kind of a gathering, invited me to come back, and I did, and Marge was there, dressed in black and white, to be a participant in this program. But anyway, that sort of thing went on, and anyway, one of the other people that was involved and became very important to us was a teacher who had been a girls' physical education teacher at Central for years and years. Her name was Martha Gorder, and Martha, one Christmas vacation when she was a young teacher at Central, coming back from vacation, Christmas vacation, and coming back to Pueblo after spending some time at home, I think in Nebraska or someplace back in the Midwest. She got caught in a snowstorm and had to stop overnight up in northeastern Colorado someplace. I don't know where it was, but she stayed at a motel or a hotel, snowbound for overnight until they cleared the road. And they had a piano. She had a music minor. She was a physical education major, but she had a music minor. They had a piano in the lobby or something, and she plunked around on that piano. And when she left, she had composed what came to be well known at Central as the fight song, "Fight, Fight for Central." And so one day, after she determined that she wanted to come to South, I said to her, half jokingly, I said, "Well, Martha, while you're waiting, why don't you compose a fight song for South High School?" And I really was really almost in a joking manner. I didn't really expect much of it. And a few days later, 10 or so, I heard a noise in the auditorium at Central. I opened the door, And there's Martha at the piano, and she had 4 or 5 girls around her who I found out were all bound to come to South too. And they were working away, and they came up with Fight for the Black and White. And so Martha Gorder had the distinction of writing the fight songs for both Central and South. And furthermore, the fact that we had that caused the other schools on the other side of the river to get concerned too. Centennial had, years before, a student at Centennial had written a song for the band, actually. He composed and had music for the band, which was, Centennial for years, their fight song really belonged to the University of Wisconsin. It was On Centennial instead of On Wisconsin. But they had another song that this young man had composed, On Ye Loyal Bulldogs of the Red and White. That was it, On Ye Loyal Bulldogs. And that inspired the band director at East High School to go to work, and he composed a song for them. And so all of a sudden we have 4 high schools in the city, all with original compositions for their fight songs. And years later, by the way, when I was here, they had a gathering for junior achievement in which the people that had sponsored these various student groups in the junior achievement program were all having a banquet celebrating their activities. And I was sitting beside a guy from Greeley who found out that I was from Pueblo, and he said, you know, and I told him that I had been on the faculty at Centennial, and he said, you know, he said, I wrote a song when I was over there. I wonder if, I said, was it On Ye Loyal Bulldogs of the Red and White, For Victory Will Win You Today? And he said, yes, yes. And I said, well, I can tell you that that probably is now the Centennial fight song after all these years. His name was Todd, and he was he had grocery stores in this area, in Greeley, and he had one here in Fort Collins, Toddy's Market. And he was a guy who, as a probably a sophomore or junior member of the Centennial Band, had composed that song, and they used it. They had used it. They used it as a kind of a secondary sort of song, but it really became, I think, their fight song after the rest of us had original songs. It was interesting. So Martha Gorder had the distinction of writing fight songs for both Central and South. And she finished her career at South, and after a long service to both schools on the South Side. Oh, wow, we wanted excellence in every department. I was extremely proud of our industrial arts program, for example. We had a marvelous, our medals program. Harlan Clift was his name, I think it was. He was great. Yeah. And I felt, you know, we, prior to Sputnik and all these things, there was a lot of fiddle-faddle about the comprehensive high school. And actually, if you go way back in educational history, there was a time when there was national recognition for something called the Pueblo Plan. The Pueblo Plan, way back in the 19 teens someplace, was really a comprehensive high school. And the proposition of it was that you could have excellent academics and practical arts in the same student body, and it works. And so Central was the heart and soul of that Pueblo plan, was Central High School, which had a tremendous program in woodwork and metalwork, those technical studies in industrial arts, and in academics. And so really, that was sort of a heritage for us. And we certainly did not slack off at all in our commitment to things like music and social studies and English. And of course, Dave Robb was a Centennial Bulldog. One of the other people in that group was a young man who actually was in the first class over at East. He became the most rabid Colt faculty member, that we probably ever had. So we got some awfully good input and something extra from people from East and Centennial who came over and joined our faculty.